Hello! Welcome to part one of the Dune Tank and Brief Sewalong. In today's episode, we're going to go through all of the preliminary stuff before you get started. We're going to talk about what you get in your digital pattern, this guy right here, the instruction booklet, as well as the digital pattern guide, and then we're going to talk about all three of the different files that you get for the pattern itself. I'm going to show you how to print the print-at-home version and trim it and assemble it to make the whole pattern. And then I'm going to talk through the different parts of this instruction booklet, what's in it, what's important, what key things to really think about. We're going to then talk about fabric types, and then I'm just going to go through notions and tools. So just a lot of prep stuff today. No sewing, no pattern alterations yet, none of that business, just getting ready. So if you're ready, here we go. All right, so let's talk about what you get with your digital pattern. You're going to get 5 files. One is the actual instructions for how to sew the Dune tank and pattern, the Dune tank and briefs. So it's all of the information that you expect to see in a typical booklet or on the back of the pattern envelope. So your sizing information, how to sew with knits, your cutting layout, and all of that. And we'll talk more about what's in this booklet in a little bit. You're also going to get a digital pattern instruction guide, which specifically walks you through how to work with a digital pattern versus a printed version. So in here, it's going to talk about the 3 different files for printing. So you get these 2 booklets plus these 3 files for a total of 5 things. First one is a US copy shop. It is going to be on 36-inch wide paper. This one is 36 by 50 inches, and that number is in the file, so when you go to upload it to get it printed, you don't have to try to hunt for that, so you know exactly how big that is going to be. You can also get it printed on an A0 sheet, which used to be mostly just available outside of the US, but these days this is a really common thing even in the US to print. And I'm really stoked that I was able to fit the entire Dune pattern on one single A0 sheet of paper. So that's a really cost-effective choice. Even more cost-effective, depending on your ink and toner and paper situation, is just the print-at-home version, which I'm going to show you how to assemble here. There are instructions on how to print it out, and what the main thing is that you want to keep in mind is that you want the page scaling to be none or to have it scale at 100%. So when you are at your computer and you're printing it out, you want to make sure that the button that says size to fit is not selected. You want it to either be print full size or you want it to be print at 100%. So either one of those is what you're looking for. You do not want it to scale to fit the paper because it will print it too small or too big, and then your pattern will not be the right size. Once you have that good to go, you're going to find this legend right here in your booklet, and that is for how to put the 25 sheets together. And then after this, there is a letter permission in case the place you're sending it to print requires that. It's in here. And then of course the last photo of my lovely model Trista wearing the Dune set. So for printing it out at home and taping it together, I know this can be a tedious task. I don't think anyone actually enjoys it, but it's really not that cumbersome, especially with only 25 sheets. And it's a really convenient and easy way to just buy it and print it and start sewing it all in one moment. So what I like to do is trim off the right and the bottom, or the right and the top. Either one is fine. And that way we can overlap those cut areas onto the margins of the preceding pages to the right and below. So you can see right there that this will start to form the pattern piece. So I'm going to trim off the right side of this guy as well as the bottom. And you'll see that it starts to emerge when you start to put them all together. So what's going to happen is this cut edge is going to overlap with this margin, and the dash line here is going to line up with the dash line there. And you're going to see that those are going to line up. So we're going to continue trimming the right and the bottom all across that first top row, which is 5 pages wide, of course, as we just saw. And then you're just going to simply tape these pages together. This can be a good thing to do when you want to just put on a movie or something on the TV that you don't have to watch too closely, something you've seen before. And there's the first 2 pages put together. And you're going to continue this process all the way across until you have formed that first row here in the legend. So there's the first 5 pages there. And then what I like to do is do each row and then tape each row together. So I would tape all 5 pieces together and set that aside, tape 6 through 10, set that aside, and carry on, and then attach at these long sections. So you'd be joining rows 1 through 5 with 6 through 10 right there. That's, to me, the easiest approach. So you're just working with these strips of 5. They're not too long and too big. And then you're just attaching right there. Once you have that all together, it's going to be just like as if you had printed it on AO or on copy shop paper. And from there you can, of course, cut your pattern piece out or trace it off. I always recommend tracing it off because who wants to reprint this again and again? Nobody wants that. And that is how you put your pattern together. So just to familiarize yourself with what's in the instruction booklet, we have our Getting Started page, which is going to talk about the pattern itself, choosing a size, and how it fits your body. And this is just a little blurb about how I've designed it to fit. Preparing the pattern, the importance of sewing a muslin, and the importance of preparing your fabric. That is particularly important with knits, as knits tend to shrink a lot more than a woven. So you definitely want to pre-wash and dry your fabric choice for the Dune pattern. After that, we have information about the pattern itself, our illustration of what the pattern looks like. We have our size chart as well as our yardage requirements. So sizes extra small through 4X. These are the body measurements. And then that goes down along with our fabric requirements for the tank, our fabric requirements for the brief. If you're going to do both, you simply just can add those up together. You'll see in the layout that it won't change much at all if you're going to do both. And then our finished measurements, and all of this is in both imperial and metric. A little bit of information at the bottom here that is important. The length of tank is measured from center back scoop to the hem. So the reason that I did it from the center back of the scoop to the bottom is because the straps are adjustable. You can make those straps as long or as short as you want them to be. So can't really measure from the top of the strap to the bottom because you can make the strap whatever you want it to be. But this at least shows you how long the body is going to be from the center back down. It also says here fabric requirements assume the greatest stretch is from selvage to selvage with non-directional fabric. And extra fabric might be required for if the greatest stretch is from cut end to cut end, or if there's a nap, one-way design, shading, matching, shrinkage, all of that extra stuff. So you want to just take into account that I'm assuming from this requirements that the greatest stretch is around the width of your fabric. So again, from selvage to selvage versus from cut end to cut end. And I can't configure every possible, fabric size combination here. So if you're veering from that, you're going to need to do a little bit of math. And of course, again, like it says, if you've got a print on it or you're matching plaids or stripes, you might need a little extra. And of course, again, you might want a little extra for shrinkage. For knit fabrics, I tend to buy an extra 1/4 of a yard. So if this calls for 1 1/4, I would get 1 1/2 and just allow that little bit of shrinkage because it's definitely going to shrink a little bit. Lastly, it says, please note the waist binding piece for size 4X does not fit on the cross grain, a 44-inch wide or 112 centimeter wide fabric. If using a 4-way stretch, this piece can be turned lengthwise and 1 1/2 yards would be required. That is specifically right here for these two that say see note. It's not that common to have knit fabrics come in 44-inch wide fabric anyway, but just in case you do come across it, it won't fit on the width and it would need to either be turned lengthwise or you would want to bump up to a wider fabric. Next up, we have the pattern pieces themselves, a little inventory of what we're working with so that you can familiarize yourself with their shapes and where the grain lines are and all of that. And then some information about the pattern itself. I'm calling this a 1 spool difficulty. It's not hard. It's not what I would call a super beginner pattern because it's a little fiddly, but it's also not difficult. So I'm calling it a 1. Notions. We're going to get into notions in a minute, but essentially you need thread. And if you're going to do the tank, you're going to need O-rings, 4 1/2-inch O-rings and 1 yard of 1/4 inch elastic. The seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch for putting all of the seams together, and then it's a 1/4 inch when we actually attach the bindings to all of the openings. Suggested fabric, and again, we're going to talk more about this with actual examples, but you're going to want a medium weight 2-way or 4-way stretch knits with at least 2% elastic content like cotton and spandex blends. And we're going to talk more about that, so I'm not going to elaborate too much on that right now. Instruction notes. This is important too. For ease of construction, I just used a dash line for everything that you're stitching in the instructions, because if I were to do like a serger stitch on every single seam, it would just be very messy and complicated to try to look at the instructions. So there's just a simple dash line for all of the stitching. And then a little bit of glossary for the things we're doing in this pattern. We have our cutting layouts. And again, you can see, perfect example, pieces 1 and 2, which are the tank front and back, are going in reverse direction. So if you're using a pattern, a fabric that has a pattern on it that's directional, you would need to switch that one around, which would then bump all of these down, which would mean then a little more fabric yardage. Putting them bottoms together, hem to hem, saves fabric space here. And the same is true here with the briefs, 7 and 8, the front and back. Little bit about stitch options, and again, we'll get more into this as I actually show you how to sew things together, but just to illustrate for you your different choices. And I'm not going to go into that too much just yet. And then a bit about sewing with knits itself, because maybe this is new for you, sewing with knits. Notches, the Dune uses a 3/8 and 1/4 inch seam allowance. That essentially means your notches need to be tiny. You need to just really be conservative about how much you're snipping into your seam allowances, because that's really small. Needles, we'll talk more about this as well when we start sewing, but essentially you're going to want a ballpoint or a jersey needle. Machines, you can use an overlock for part of it, and you can use a conventional machine for all of it. You will definitely need a conventional machine even if you have a serger, because there are parts that need that top stitching. Thread we're going to talk more about, but you want it to be synthetic for sure, so that your body, it's right up against your body. It's underwear, so you're going to be sweating in it and stuff, and you don't want that to disintegrate your natural fiber thread. Hemming goes back to our stitch choices and different things you can do there with a zigzag or a cover stitch. Stretch, again, is about the fabric, and we're going to talk more about that. And that shrinkage is just to really reiterate that you should pre-wash and maybe buy a smidge extra. After that, we get into our sewing instructions. We've got our tank, 2 pages for that, and then a full page on how to sew the briefs together. And then the all-important hashtags. Please use the Christine Haynes Dune. My hashtags are always Christine Haynes and then the name of the pattern. And then the catch-all, of course, is Christine Haynes Patterns. And that, my friends, is the Dune booklet. All right, let's talk a little bit about fabric. So as I mentioned in the instruction booklet, you need a stretch fabric, obviously. And it's best if you have at least 2% of elastic content. And what I mean by that is like spandex or lycra, same thing. So my preferred is something around like 5%, like a 95% cotton and a 5% spandex. There are other things you can choose. And even within that, you know, cottons can vary. Think about like a quilt weight and a lawn. So those are both 100% cotton, but they're gonna feel a little bit different. So even a 95.5 is gonna have varying levels of thickness and stiffness. So they're not all gonna be exactly the same. So the model is using, in the pattern picture, she's wearing this fabric here, which is a blend from Blackbird Fabrics. It's a modal and cotton and spandex. So it's a little drapier and a little softer. It's really squishy and nice, and it has a really good recovery, and that's what you're looking for. Of course, it depends. If you're thinking of wearing the briefs as actual underwear, then what you might want is potentially going to be a little bit different than if you're going to wear it as loungewear or as sleepwear. So this is a really good choice, especially for like loungewear, because it has bounce, but it's also really soft and kind of squishy. Both of the samples that my model is wearing is using this fabric from Blackbird Fabrics. This is from TaylorMade, which I just bought. I saw it on their Instagram feed and immediately went and bought it. It's a 95.5, so 95 cotton, 5% spandex. And I absolutely love this print. And it's not, I find personally, it's not easy to find really great prints in this particular substrate configuration, 95.5. I find great solids, really good solids, but sometimes the prints are a little juvenile, which is fine, but finding something kind of sophisticated and elegant is not always easy. This is beautiful. It's exactly what you're looking for. It has really good bounce and return. It's a little bit thicker than this modal blend, but it's going to make a really good set. This is another 95.5 blend, but just for reference, this is a lot thinner. I got this locally at a fabric store here near my house. It has good return, but not quite as good because it's a lot thinner. So you always want to just, double check how that's gonna spring back. So these are both the same 95.5, but this is significantly thinner than this one. Now that's not necessarily bad, because again, like let's say I'm gonna wear this as actual underwear. Maybe I want this to be a little bit thinner because I'm gonna be wearing it under my jeans or whatever. So that's not a bad choice either. Two examples of things that are maybe not as ideal, but you could use. This is a rayon blend. You can see it's a lot drapier. It's like really slinky and drapey. This is not exactly what I would choose for something. If you wanted to look like the model is wearing it, then you're not gonna want like a rayon knit like this. But if you want it to be kind of loose and drapey, this is a great choice. But you can see it has like way more stretch than this one does, for example. This one stretches, but there's a stopping point, where this one just keeps going and going and going because it's got a lot of rayon in it. So again, not a bad choice, but just a different choice. And lastly, this is just a little swatch of some fabric I've been working with. If you saw on my Instagram feed recently, I made a pair of Hudson joggers out of this. This is 100% cotton. So a common question I'm already getting via email is, can I not just use 100% cotton? Of course, you definitely can. It's a 4-way stretch. It doesn't stretch as much in this direction, but it has some mechanical stretch because it doesn't have spandex in it. So it's not quite what I would call a 2-way stretch, but it's close. Obviously the key is that this fabric stretches around your body and that there's just enough give vertically to get it on and off your body. But you can see this is a thicker, I hope you can see that, maybe you can. And it's not gonna have that return. So as you pull on it, it's gonna just continue to widen and grow. It's not gonna spring back as nicely. Again, that would make really nice, cozy, at home sort of jammy version of the Dune. But this is not gonna have that spring back that you're looking for if you wanted to like cling to your body and return. So you can use something like this, it's just gonna wear differently. I don't really stick to too many hard and fast rules with sewing. I don't really enjoy that. Like, you absolutely can't use this or you absolutely have to use this. I never think that way. You just need to understand the ramifications of your decision. So if you want to use a rayon, that's fine. It's not going to look like it does on the model because it's going to be drapey. You want to use 100% cotton, you can do that too. But it's going to grow as you're wearing it. It's not going to bounce back and wrap around your body as tightly. So you just need to know what's going to happen based on what you choose. But there are some really good 95.5 blends out there. The Laguna knits from Robert Kaufman is a 95.5, and the Art Gallery knit fabrics are also 95 cotton, 5% spandex, and both of those are really, really nice and perfect for this set as well. So if you can't find what you're looking for, you can always search for Art Gallery knits or Robert Kaufman Laguna knits, and you will find the right thing. All right, let's get to know our notions and our tools a little bit. First of all, notions. So obviously you're gonna need thread, and like I said in the instructions and previously, I definitely recommend a synthetic thread. So these are two different polyester choices that I use regularly. This is the Gutermann, what is this called? I don't know what it's called. It's just their all-purpose thread, I guess. It's 100% polyester. I just buy this locally in this big spool, and this is a perfect choice. This is the Gutermann Mara, which is also 100% polyester. And I get this from Wawak. It's great. They have a lot of color choices if you have their color chart. But they're both just Gutermann 100% polyester. They both work great. You definitely want something synthetic so that it can't deteriorate by your, body sweat and stuff, because it's going to be right up against your body. So those are both great. Another choice is this Maxi-Lock Stretch textured nylon thread. I will be honest, prior to sewing this pattern, I had never used this before. But I have read on many people's blogs that this is like mind-blowing and it stretches, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just give this a try. So I did, and I really, really loved it. This is a textured nylon. It's probably impossible to tell on camera, but it is sort of fuzzy, I guess is the right word. It's kind of thick. It's not thick in its density, but it's thick in its width. It's like fuzzy nylon. I totally didn't think it was gonna work. I was like, how is this gonna work? But I really liked it, and it really did actually allow my stitches to stretch beyond what the polyester could do. When we get to sewing, I will do an example of each and show you, but if you've never used this before, you might be into it. I was like, I'm into it. This is what it looks like with the packaging. Maxi-Lock Stretch, soft like yarn, textured nylon. I only saw it in the serger cones. So I got one of those little stands that you can put behind your machine so that I could use this on my regular conventional machine and my non-serger. So you can definitely do that too. But it's a little investment, you have to buy the cone and you have to buy the stand. But if you want to try it, this works really great too. Okay, elastic is needed for the straps. If you're just doing the tank, or I'm sorry, if you're just doing the briefs, you obviously don't need the elastic. I made the straps have elastic in it so that they would spring back really nice, and so they don't get stretched out both in wearing and in sewing. So this, you will need just some basic 1/4 inch elastic, nothing fancy. And then you will also need O-rings. Depending again on when you're watching this, there might be some kits still left in my store, my online store. I did a bunch of kits with different metalled O-rings and 1 yard of elastic. So it comes with 4 rings and 1 yard, which is enough to do 1 tank. But these are just some examples. This is the shiny silver, the shiny gold, and the black. This is a 1/2 inch O-ring. These are metal. You could use plastic. You can use whatever you like. But the tank straps are attached in the front and back with an O-ring so that you can make the strap adjustable. The other thing I like about that is if the strap were to give way, then you could always cut the strap off and just make a new strap, and the rest of the tank is fine. So you will need 4 O-rings, 1/2 inch O-rings. Those are all your notions: thread, elastic, and O-rings. So let's talk about tools. If you want to use a rotary cutter and a ruler for cutting out, you can obviously do that. And then you'll need some pattern weights. I find that knit fabrics are a lot easier to cut using weights and a rotary cutter, personally. While you're sewing, you're going to want pins. You might enjoy clips at certain spots. I'm more of a pin gal, but I know that a lot of people like the little clips, which will work as well. You're gonna need, obviously, scissors. I like little scissors for when I'm actually sewing, and your big scissors for when you're cutting out. And lastly, a seam gauge is always a handy tool to have around. I use it all the time. So like when you're folding your hems and stuff like that, it's just a really nice and easy way to like fold and precisely measure and fold small amounts. Like when we put the strap on at the top of the tank, you know, where the strap attaches. That's a really nice spot to have something small to measure. And that's it. Not a lot of tools, not a lot of notions. Maybe a couple notions you're not used to, like the O-rings, but you know, that's why I made a kit, so that you can just buy the pattern and buy the notions and then move on. And then further down the line, you may find another source that you like for the O-rings, but at least you'll have a set to just get started, and those are in the store. All right, so that's the end of our first Sewalong entry. I hope you're ready to pick your fabric, get your tools ready, get all that stuff. Don't forget that if you need the notions, as of right now, there are still some notion kits in my shop. So if you want to grab one of those, they're $5. It's no big deal. And then it keeps you from having to try to hunt down the O-rings. And then it gives you an example as well of like what you're looking for. So when you are done with the kit, if you want to get more, you know what you're looking for. In the next episode, we're going to talk all about sizing, fit, how they fit, both the briefs and the tank, and then we're going to go through some pattern alterations in case you want to shorten the length of either item or change the leg curve or narrow the crotch or whatever. We're going to go through a bunch of that stuff. So I will see you in the next one.